The American Adoption Congress 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991 in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 22A.
We'll all wake up together, I think. I'm from Atlanta. I'm an adult who grew up in a closed adoption. I'm also a therapist. I see people related to adoption issues, but I also see other folks as well in the disability area. But first and foremost, this morning I'm an adoptee, and we're going to talk about a subject that is very prevalent and very dear to most of us, and that is anger. But before we start, it would be a good idea, I think, to get a feel for just who we have in the audience. First, how many adoptees do we have?
Good.
Okay, great. I'll have help, I hope. All right, how many birth parents? Okay. How many adoptive parents? Okay.
A nice even mix.
Yes. How many professionals do we have? Therapists?
A lot of overlap.
Okay. How many, and so I guess everybody almost has a dual role?
How many significant others?
Okay.
Well, you're important. You're supporting all these other people. Do you want Dory and I to introduce ourselves?
Yes, please. Yes. Dory, would you like to? Yep.
I'm Dorothea MacArthur, and I'm a writer in the field of adoption and clinical psychology. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in adoption and some other fields. I'm also an adoptive mother, so this is a topic of real interest to me.
We're going to be playing with this mic, so we apologize. I'm Sharon Kaplan, and it's nice to be here, and I respect you getting up this early to talk about anger. But maybe there's a good side to that, because maybe you're still a little too sleepy to vent a whole lot of it. I'm the Director of Parenting Resources here in Southern California. I'm a social worker by training. But most importantly, what brings me to the panel this morning is I'm an adoptive parent, and I have parented children by birth, by adoption, and by long-term foster care. And most of our children who came home at older ages, and they were very angry. So I lived with children who broke my nose and broke my toes, and verbally abused me well into adulthood because of their rage from their previous experiences and their separation from their families of origin. And I think felt very powerless and frightened because of what had happened to them in the system. So this is certainly a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm looking forward to our sharing this morning.
Okay, just briefly, I'd like to introduce sort of my beginning thought about anger as it relates to this. We're going to hear more later about the theoretical causes and implications of anger. But for me, anger is, for those of us who are bent towards terms, phenomenological. It's something that occurs. It's a process. It's a way of communicating sometimes, albeit difficult and maybe not the best way, but it does communicate. I don't think it really has a single cause. I don't think of myself as having an indwelling rage or anger. I think it occurs to me, and I think it's something that I have hopefully options for handling and dealing with and working with. It's sort of like a fire alarm. It goes off, and it tells me that I have to either change some of the things that I'm acting and towards the outside world, or possibly look at myself a little bit and find out what it is internally that I'm doing that causes this. So it's a signal, and it's also a form of communication. It's something that's, as I say, I think part of a process. We experience anger. I don't think we have it. In fact, rage can keep us from really understanding some of the issues that cause this anger. I'd like a little bit of help from the adoptees and the audience, and if we can just possibly identify who we're angry at. That might be a good first step. Would anyone like to, and also just briefly state What is it that makes you angry? Why are you angry at that person or that thing?
One of the things that still makes me angry is my adoptive parents' inability to see me as a person. They had so many expectations for me. I was supposed to be the perfect kid, and I just never felt like they knew me at all.
Okay, so you're angry at parents, and you're angry at them.
At the adoptive parents.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
Try and repeat what she said as much as possible.
Okay. Okay. Yes?
I'd say that I'm angry at my adopted parents too, and it's for only wanting to know a particular part of me, the part of me that they feel that they have part in creating. They don't sort of want to know all of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that's very upsetting.
Okay. Okay. Who else? Angry at parents? Is there anybody else that we're angry at? Another one?
I'm still furious with the Children's Home Society of California, who even though I have the death certificates of my birth parents, will not release my file.
Mm-hmm.
They say it's confidential material.
Mm-hmm.
That just makes me furious.
Okay.
My history, my roots.
Okay. Who else are we angry at? Anybody? Is it all directed towards parents?
I think I direct that anger toward the same kind of anger. It goes all kinds of places,
Mm-hmm.
the same kinds of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
The frustration of my wanting to be seen.
Okay, so you feel thwarted.
I feel thwarted.
Okay.
And so it goes out and touches other people as well. But I think it's the origin of it was in that pattern with my parents.
Okay.
I feel like I'm angry at the social workers who talked my birth mother into giving me up and my birth mother's family. I also did the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can comment on that a little bit later. Okay. How about other people in the system that we have? I mean, we have a large system that's in relation to, because adoption is a process just as anger is a process, a little different type. Yeah.
Yes, a judge in Portland that was considered the dean of the family court, highly praised and looked up to. When he retired, there was actually a long column in our Southern Oregon paper.
Mm-hmm.
He also was an adopted parent from a private adoption.
Mm.
And when I went to see him, hoping that he might give me non-identifying information, all he wanted to talk about was his own adoption, and he was very, very angry.
Okay. So you feel angry at the political process and at attorneys or judges that handle certain aspects of...
Well, certainly him, because he wasn't even interested in my case. He was only interested in his own situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You're angry at an attorney because he wouldn't listen to you.
No, judge.
Oh, judge. Okay.
Dean of the court.
Okay. Anyone else? Other objects that we're angry at in this whole process of adoption? It has a whole, yeah?
Angry at my mother for giving me away.
Okay. Angry at your birth mother for giving you away. Yeah?
Yeah, I echo those sentiments.
Okay.
In fact, I'm an adoptee, and this is my first conference, and I decided to switch about 2 weeks ago. And I hear birth mothers and the birth grandmothers talking about rights,
Mm-hmm.
and it really pisses me off.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay.
You mentioned birth mothers. I'm wondering, is anybody angry at birth fathers? Can you articulate that a little bit?
My birth father was 27, and my birth mother was 34, and I don't see any reason why they couldn't have worked something out to keep it. My birth mother also had a 4-year-old son that she passed.
Okay. Yeah.
As an adoptive mother, I'm angry at the system for not having better medical information available for possible problems with these children, etc.
Okay, so you're angry at the system as such for not doing what you needed to be a good parent. Okay. Okay.
I'm angry at the birth mother, my eldest daughter, for not making herself available to my daughter.
Okay.
Can you all hear this in the back? 'Cause- oh.
Yeah. Those of us, maybe another way to look at this, those of us who have searched and found, how many people have searched and found in the room as adoptees? Okay. Anybody get angry in that process? Who did we get angry at? Social workers? Somebody want to, why did you get angry at a social worker, for heaven's sakes? They're here to help.
Here's the secret.
Yeah.
I've searched and found that I have the authorization for my adoptive parents and the birth parents, and the adoption agency still won't let me see my records.
Okay.
And I am over 21. They won't help me.
Okay. Yeah?
I'm the child of an adoptee, and I'm angry at his adoptive mother, who I never met, and a social worker for keeping a secret from my dad. And then when he was 5 years old and could read, he found the papers himself after he'd been told, after asking, that he wasn't adopted. This affected me and my sister all through our lives, with trust issues and him thinking we were keeping secrets from him and so forth. And I'm mad at those two women there.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Okay. Yeah.
I have a lot of anger to deal with. There's just so much. One is I'm in a situation where my birth mother, my adoptive mother, had known each other and been friends ever since, I was, born, and I didn't find this out until I was 29. I'm 31. No one told me I was adopted, so I just playing catch up. And just, it's like, I look at, either my adoptive family or my birth family, it's like they're so afraid to do something. It's like they end up doing nothing, just waiting who's going to stick up for me.
Right.
It's kind if I ask, I don't know if I haven't, gotten nervous or afraid how my anger is going to come out, because the family not dealing with angry feelings, I had nothing to go by. So it's really like, because there weren't people standing up for me or protecting me, it's like I feel like I've ended up having to do this myself. And just, here I am, I find out, I'm adopted, and I was, molested when I was a 14-year-old. And like, I didn't realize all these, secrets that were going on around me. And another thing that's really strange, my birth mother seemed to have the most open adoption situation there ever was that I've ever heard of. She could come by and say hi to my parents.
Okay.
And talk to them and see me and see how I was doing. It was just closed to me. And just trying to, let me in. I mean, this is my stuff, and this, belongs to me. Look at me. It's like emotionally I've had to feel like I had to make things right for them. And I'm just waiting for how am I going to communicate, to say what I feel and what needs to be done without, blowing my brains by fear of abandonment too, especially anger. I feel like I've got loads of it to deal with.
Okay.
And so I have to take it real slow. Because it's just overwhelming.
Right, for sure.
Let's repeat that one just briefly for the tape. We haven't been doing
Go ahead.
that.
I'm not sure I can do it, and I'm not going to stop.
for you.
I'm not going to stop us from doing that, because I think it's more important that we have people expressing their feelings and not maybe summarizing that way sometimes. Yeah.
I'm a birth mother, and one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is that I'm terribly angry at myself. And I could enumerate a million different objects of that anger.
Okay.
It's
Try.
You want me to?
1, 2.
For having bought the story.
Okay.
For having been in denial for so many years.
Okay.
For having been victimized and felt a victim.
Right.
For all of the ramifications that exist today
Okay.
in terms of my own family, my son, nothing is right.
Okay.
It will never be right. Someone used the term recovered birth mother, and I think it's really
Okay.
accurate.
Good. Okay. Good. Yeah.
I'm also angry with myself, but it's because of what the lady on the front row said about your parents
put you're supposed to be up here and you didn't quite make it. I'm angry at myself because I allow her
To still do it?
feel that.
Okay.
Because, damn it, I'm okay. And I'm,
Yep.
where I feel like I am is okay. And I guess I should say, I'm sorry. If I didn't make it for you, then
Right.
that's your problem,
Okay.
not mine.
Okay. So your anger being called special.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's not weird.
But you feel entitled to being weird, right? Good. Yeah.
I'm really angry at my doctor, whom we adopted our daughter from, because he committed suicide and he didn't give me any information before he and I always really thought that he would be the one, because he delivered my children and delivered her, that he would really be there for me.
The anchor that you needed.
And the attorney was the only one that knew, so when I contacted him, he told me the parents had never contacted him and he promised confidentiality. Well, after 3 years of going to AAC, I found out that he lied because the father had approached him. And so because of that, I'm very angry at the attorney, because if we had only been able to find her birth parents, I feel that maybe it would have eliminated the pregnancy that she had and the baby that we relinquished just 3 years ago. And I'm really angry because I didn't step in and keep the baby. I thought it needed parents. I'm really angry because the adoption agency didn't recognize my feelings, and they said I was unstable. I might be, but my husband isn't. I mean, they made all the decisions for me when I was crying out that I needed openness. And my daughter said afterwards, she says, now I know how I feel when my mother had to give me up. And I'm very angry that the perpetuating birth mother syndrome has to be, and I'm hurting because I want my grandbaby. And I'm angry at everybody, I guess, and I say I'm not.
Good. Yes.
I'm angry at my son's birth mother for not relinquishing any information about birth loss.
Okay.
She keeps it totally closed, so we have no contact with half the family.
Okay. All right. So, you know, a lot of us were, I think, adopted as infants, and that does represent a whole area in the way we started this whole process, I think. But as time goes on, and there are other parts of the adoption community where people were not adopted as infants. In fact, they're older and have memories and relationships from the past. Does anyone have any thoughts or experiences with that they'd like to share with us? Yes?
I was adopted when I was 5.
Yes?
Korea. And I'm angry at being told that I was lucky to be adopted. I'm angry that I was told that my birth mother loved me so much and that's why she gave me up. And I'm angry that a lot of adopted parents who adopt children from other countries feel entitled to adopt a child from another country because they feel that they can parent the child better.
Okay.
And I'm angry at a lot of things for not being able to find my birth parents, and having to go back to it if I choose to go, and for not having the access that a lot of people in this room have.
Okay.
I'm angry that my cultural identity was ripped away from me,
Right.
and has been denied to me for many years. And I've had to fight for many years and struggle to reclaim it.
Good for you. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, I think then we've established some things and some people and some objects and some reasons and some feelings and attitudes of why we're angry a little bit, and that's what this session is all about. So I think our next thing is to turn to Sharon, who will talk to us a little bit about some of the hypotheses to consider in adoptive parenting.
How about if I take the microphone?
Okay.
Thank you. Didn't wear the right dress for hooking up. You got to plan your wardrobe around hookups. That works. So we've established that there are reasons to be angry. True? Yeah. Okay. All right. And I want to remind us that we really are here to talk about why our adoptees, and if in fact they are, and some of you have established that, why are adoptees angry at their adoptive parents? We know that there's anger all around in other parts of the triad, and I think we might want to look at that as maybe something that impacts the adoptee growing up. And so we can explore that a little bit more too, as birth parents raise their anger issues and adoptive parents raise their own. What I'd like to do is to present some hypotheses that we've kind of kicked around and see if they make sense to you, because I couldn't find very much in terms of previous conferences or workshops that had addressed this issue, so we're kind of left with thinking about it from our own experiences. So I'm going to give you 4 or 5 hypotheses and explore them a little bit, and then hopefully a little bit later, because we're going to have this kind of a discussion, and we're going to have a little break, and then we're going to have a panel, and then Dory's going to present some material, and then we're going to spend the last half hour or so really dialoguing about all of this material. So you might want to jot them down somewhere and think about them and feed us back. Does it make sense or does it not? The first hypothesis as to why adoptees might be angry at their adoptive parents is that relinquishment and adoption are really separate, distinct events. And adoptees have a right to think about them and feel about them as distinctly different. That the experience of being separated from your family of origin is one issue in your life, and the adoption is another issue in your life. Does that make sense? Okay. And we tend, as adoptive parents, I think, to glump them together. So adoptees can actually see and be relieved that they were relinquished. And I have many adoptees who come from very dysfunctional backgrounds where they suffered a great deal of abuse, or where as they get their family history, they understand how really difficult it may have been for their birth parents at that time of their lives to parent them. So they can be relieved about the relinquishment, and be relieved perhaps even that their birth parents' rights were terminated in relation to them for good reason. And even be relieved and still be angry that life dealt them a raw deal. And that's hard to separate out, I think, until you reach a certain level of maturity. You can say, I understand all that. And I can understand that that was a good thing that happened to me for these reasons. But why did it have to happen to me? Why did my birth parents have to be that way? Or why did my birth parent have to be so young? Or why wasn't there somebody there to support my birth parent? So they can be relieved that it occurred because they can see that it actually was to their benefit, and still be angry in connection to the life circumstances that caused it to occur. You talked about coming from Korea. I think that I talk to many adoptees who've come here from foreign countries, and on the one hand, they can say, I'm relieved that I have this opportunity, but on the other hand, I think it's a raw deal that my country had such poverty, or there was such war going on, that there was no place for families to raise us in our countries of origin. Adoptees can be angry about being separated from family of origin and still love their adopted families. And unless the adoptive family can see those as 2 separate events, there's not permission to do that. So you can be angry about your relinquishment and angry about your adoption if it wasn't a good experience either way. You can be angry about your relinquishment and be happy about your adoption if you had a good experience. Okay? Is this making sense? Okay. And you can feel good about the relinquishment and bad about the adoption because you had a bad adoption experience. You can say, it's probably a good thing I got separated from my family of origin, but why did I have to get into this rotten family? So we really have to be able to talk about these anger issues as separate, one from the other. Still, though, the issue is that we often transfer our feelings to the present people in our life. So for the adoptees that I raised, or the adoptees, many of whom I've known in the community, who have been angry at being relinquished or angry at their country of origin for letting them go halfway around the world for a new family, or whatever the circumstances might be, if that cannot be separated out, and it often can't be by children, what ends up happening is the adoptive parents feel that, and they personalize it. And many times, I had to say to myself, after I had just taken a real verbal beating, I actually had to say out loud to myself someplace else, they're not really angry at me. I'm a good mother. I'm doing okay. It's just that I'm providing a good enough atmosphere for them to feel free enough to ventilate. But that's real hard to do, particularly if it happens for years. And some of you adoptees may have been angry for years about your adoption and taken those feelings and put them for years onto your adoptive parents, therefore not allowing yourself or them to have a relationship with you that wasn't angry. Now, if this doesn't make sense, stop me, because I'm still thinking about it in my own head, but I see a lot of heads going up and down. Okay. So when I see an adoptive couple who comes in and says to me, I don't know what we've done to deserve this. We just have been living with this for years. And I'll say to them, which is kind of paradoxical, well, good for you. It shows what wonderful parents you are. And they look at me kind of cross-eyed. Well, your adoptee obviously feels attached enough, safe enough, and loving of you enough to be able to ventilate what's there. They don't have to bury it. You're laughing, I know.
With tears in my eyes.
Laughing with tears in your eyes, yeah. Adoptees cannot be adoptive parents cannot be super parents, perfect parents, although they're often set up to be that. Adoptive parents go through their home studies and they're stamped for approval by somebody. And I know almost every adoptive parent I know carries that stamp of approval somewhere in their psyche. It's stamped in their brain. I've been approved. I've been chosen by a social worker to parent this child, or I was chosen directly by the birth family to parent this child. And that means I better be especially good. And so they set themselves into this position of, if I am this wonderful parent, why cannot I erase the pain of the relinquishment from my adoptee? The feeling is that if you're a good enough adoptive parent, you ought to be able to erase the fact of the relinquishment and the pain of the relinquishment. So not only can the adoptee get trapped in not separating out the relinquishment from the adoption, the adoptive parents are set up to not separate those out. If I was good enough, you wouldn't think about that family. If I'm a good enough parent, you won't hurt. So I must be doing something wrong. Open adoptions help, but they don't take away the issues. The issues are still there. So that's hypothesis number one. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. One of my favorite adoptees has just come in here with her husband and child, and I haven't seen him before, so I'm excited. Hi, Asa. Hi, Todd. Okay. Hypothesis B, or 2. Adoptive parents' attempt at erasing the child's losses by creating a perfect childhood for the adoptee robs the child of the opportunity to dare to express his or her feelings about the impact of relinquishment on their lives.
Can you repeat that? Yeah.
I'm going to do that. I have to think about that myself. Okay. Adoptive parents' attempt at erasing the child's losses by creating a perfect childhood, anticipating your child's every need, not letting them hurt, okay, robs that child of the opportunity to dare to express his or her own feelings about the impact of their relinquishment on their lives. Remember, step 1 was to separate relinquishment from adoption. So if the adoptive parents, being super parents, believe that their job is to set up a perfect childhood, then what you're doing is robbing your child of an opportunity to address those issues connected to their separation from their family of origin. Now, we're a society that attempts to do this a lot. And I think that's why we're a society that's so involved with addictions of one sort or another. Because we love to mask those, in quotes, negative feelings. So what we do for children is we dress them as beautifully as we can, and we send them to the best schools. And if they're sad, we feed them ice cream, or we take them to Disneyland. But we do whatever we can, and in fact we trick ourselves as adoptive parents, and we say things like, well, kids don't feel those feelings at that age. They're too young. It can't be related. I mean, after all, this baby came home as this child came home as an infant. They can't be feeling anything. So it's got to be related to something else, and I'll just cheer them up. And sadness and loss in our society is often equated with failure. You've done something wrong. If you have a sad child, you failed somehow as a parent. So what we've done then is we have cut off the adoptee's expression. And children grieve these losses, if given permission, at various cognitive levels as they grow. I mean, there's information that newborn babies grieve. There's certainly information that toddlers grieve. We certainly know that children between 7 and 11 do some real heavy grief work as they understand adoption. Then they do that again in adolescence. And then a lot of you are doing that now in adulthood. So if what your parents do when they see you do that is, I've done something wrong, what can I do to cheer you up, and disconnect you from that, then they're going to tap into your anger. I think the stereotypes, somebody mentioned lucky and special and be grateful. Count your blessings. Aren't you grateful to be a Smith? All of those become blocks. And I think the thing that happens for the adoptee is that the message is that if you don't appreciate all of this, you could in fact lose this family too. So then you really have no place to put that anger. I'm seeing an awful lot of heads. Is this ringing true for folks? Yeah. And I sometimes wonder, and Dory and I were talking about this as adoptive parents, but I sometimes wonder, is any of this related to the possibility that adoptive parents really don't believe they should have had children anyway? That somehow God knew when he made them infertile that they weren't going to be good enough parents, and that somehow you've tricked the system. And I'm not thinking this is always conscious, but just, I better really do something extra good here. So if your children begin to show signs of unhappiness in relation to being separated from their families of origin, then you feel like a failure. And that's scary for you as an adoptive parent. We talked also about the word special, and I think adoptive families have been taught to label their children, to say things like, you are special, you are chosen, which actually can make adoptees feel special in a negative way. And at some level, when you begin to understand this adoption business, you recognize that before you could be special and adopted, somebody had to unchoose you. Pardon? Okay. Explain that? Explain it, Susan? Okay. Well, as you begin to understand adoption as you grow, you realize that before these people could claim you as their child and make you special as a Smith, the Joneses had to make a conscious decision to unchoose you, which is what signing a relinquishment is. And so you get a real mixed message here, and when you get mixed messages, don't you get angry? Don't you feel powerless? It's like, what is going on here? There's a hidden message here somewhere. And of course the secrets feed into this.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. I'm a birth father, and I found my son Quinn several years ago, and his first reaction, I mean, yeah, I sent the letters, and one of the adoptive parents when he came, he was out of town when he came back. They gave him a letter from me. It was sealed, of course. He takes it, throws it on the table, and he was obviously, angry. And then we talked to his mom, who was also an adoptee, and he said, what took him so long? Which is like, that's being unchosen. Oh, wow, okay, he found me, but what took him so long? So is that-
So that issue of even when you have been sought out once again for reconnection, then the anger can be attached to what took you so long. Yeah. Or how dare you now is the other side of that I sometimes hear. Or how dare you take away my power. As an adoptee, you had all these choices, and now you're back on my doorstep, and you didn't even give me a chance to choose whether or not I was ready or willing or able to have a relationship with the birth family at this point. So it can come out either way. Also, by denying the child's beginnings, you say that the child's relinquishment experience is really insignificant, that their connection to the family of origin is insignificant. It doesn't count. Your life only started when you entered our family. There's a chair here and a chair here. So in a sense, it reflects back to Ellen Curtis's workshop. If you haven't heard it, you should buy the tape, on ownership versus entitlement. Because that's a tricky issue for adoptive families. None of us owns our children, but that whole issue of going to court and getting a piece of paper, I think has something connected to that. Who's beeping?
Who did that tape again? Who did the tape?
Ellen Curtis, she's right here. Wave your hand. Okay. Adoptive families must acknowledge their loss and sadness and give the child space to feel the loss of the birth family. So the adoptive family has to acknowledge their loss and sadness and give the child space to do the same. Otherwise, the message is, your feelings don't count because we are perfect parents. And it was interesting when you were talking about your anger that some of you touched around that when you were feeding that back to Bob. Okay, C, or the third hypothesis. Most children, due to their level of cognitive development at the time that they begin to understand adoption at all, which is between 3 and 6, are still very much into their magical thinking. I'm responsible for what happens in the world. I sent those people away. They took one look at me and went, "Ook, ugly baby, give it up." Or if I hadn't cried so much, if I hadn't needed so much, maybe they would have stayed. It's real interesting to take little adoptees to the hospital and show them newborn babies in a nursery and how little and helpless they are. Because they really do feel that they should have been able to say, "Wait a minute, come back. What are you doing? Where are you going?" So somewhere locked into that early definition of adoption is a sense that I caused my own losses. And of course, if you add to it adoptees who've been abused, who've been moved, who've been in multiple homes, that's exacerbated greatly. I mean, I don't only send away one family, I send away a whole bunch of families. And I caused them to beat me because I was such a bad kid. And there are adoptees at this conference who have experienced that, who didn't come directly from the hospital into their adoptive parent home. So if the adoptive family doesn't continue to explain adoption as the child grows, if that is a one-time telling, and I run into a lot of adoptive families who say, "Well, we told him he was adopted when he was 4. He used the word. He never asked any questions. He didn't ask, he wasn't interested." How do you know what to ask? How do you even formulate the questions if somebody doesn't prime the pump? I always give the example that for those of you who teach something about religion and prayer, would you wait for your child to reach a certain age and say, "Hey, I hear there's a God out there. I heard about it at school. Tell me about it." We kind of infuse our children with that understanding as they grow. Adoption's a very adult institution, and so we have to keep educating our children to match their cognitive development, to take them off the hook so that they don't feel responsible. And that's where some of the self-anger often resides. Clearly, children need to process their relinquishment and their adoption as separate issues over and over again as they grow, or they get left with shame and guilt and anger. And the fourth hypothesis, D, adoptive parents don't let adoptees feel the pain because it may trigger the adoptive parents' own traumas around their lost fantasy children. Some adoptive parents will say to me, if they've got children who come home at older ages, for instance, who've been abused, when the children say to them, "Where were you when I was being abused? Why didn't you come get me earlier?" And the adoptive family will often turn away or shut off those feelings of anger because of their own sense of guilt and loss and really impotence in terms of doing anything to change that scenario in their child's life. Adoptive parents feel imperfect, they feel out of control, they feel powerless. And if they let this child explore their feelings around their birth family, then their deepest fear, which is that that child will reject them and go back to the birth family, creates quite a conundrum for them. If I allow this to happen, it brings up all my fears that my child will leave.
This is the end of side A. Please turn your tape over and continue on side B. The American Adoption Congress 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991 in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 22B.
I've matured a lot more from when I first met Sharon, I guess, and it's been really helpful, but I was really, I was just really angry. I've never actually talked to my parents about John Michael because when we adopted Christopher, nothing was really said, and he doesn't know about John Michael, so I can't really talk about it to my family. And I started searching, and I was always told that I had an older brother who was 4 years older than I was, and I was from the same parents that was his parents, so we were blood brothers and sisters. But then I started searching, and we got back a paper where my birth mother had an affair with some guy at her work because she worked as a waitress when she was feeling really lonely due to the relationship because they weren't having problems. So I'm really angry because I was brought into the world by an affair, and my birth parents never told his side of the family or nothing. So when I can get into touch with them, I really think that they're not gonna want to find me because their family doesn't know about me. They hid it. I have a younger brother who's 6 years old, and him and I don't really get along because when he first brought home my parents, I didn't want another brother after John Michael, and they didn't ask me if I wanted another brother or not. And if they did, I was only around 5 or 6, so they thought it was just a passing phase. But him and I are so many years apart that we don't really connect anyways, and he brings a lot of anger into me because I always feel like he took John Michael's place, and that I didn't want that. I'm also angry because my parents, since they were white, they lived in a mostly white community in Fountain Valley, and I didn't really have any friends of my own race, so I was they didn't really help me with my heritage or learning about, how about Mexican and black heritage and race and stuff. So when we moved to Irvine, it was kind of really big change because I go to University High School where there's a lot of base kids and there's a lot of races there. And it was just a big change from going from mostly an all-white school to a very mixed cultural race. And since there's a lot of prejudice, there's a lot of racial tension in our school between the whites and the Mexicans and the blacks. So it's kind of hard for me because I'm not really into all that. But since I mostly lived in a community where it's all white, I kind of connect with the white people too. I can't really say, well, how I can't really act how the black and Mexicans think mostly. But I made new friends, and it's getting there, but I really was mad at my parents for that because they didn't help me into my heritage or nothing. I'm also really mad at my birth parents because mostly my mom, because I have a boyfriend. We've been going out for about over a year and 2 months, and him and I are not really good right now because he wants to see other people, and then that just connected with my mom having an affair, and that really made me angry. I don't like it when people do that. It's just I'm really upset how I was brought into the world, and because my parents, I think they're still together, but they just never told their family or nothing. So that I'm really angry about that. And I deal with my anger by talking a lot and doing panels telling you guys. I've done one before. I did one last Saturday. I'm doing one tomorrow. So, and I have a lot of friends now who are in adoption and stuff, and they can relate to it. And if I get really angry, I just kind of go off and do my own thing. I run or something, but I don't. Not like I used to hit people. I used to go out, and drink and get high and stuff like that. But now it's just kind of, I know how to deal with it. It's a lot better now. That's about it.
Just about covered it. I cannot provide an encore to that. I can't follow that. What I am going to try to do is remember, I was probably, if you're going to classify folks, which I kind of don't like to do, I probably was the quote-unquote good adoptee growing up. But since my basic biological endocrine system makes me something different from that, I'm a little bit more assertive. I had times when I was a bit on the rebellious side, whether from adoption or other reasons I really can't distinguish. But I'm going to try to read some thought, just a quick thought or two I have, and try to relate it to the way I felt as a kid. And I spent more time reflecting on that as an adult, and I wasn't really aware of it as a child. So if it sounds filtered or adult, it is, but I'm trying to do with it as I can here. Okay. I guess probably my biggest anger at parents can be summed up as being called special, or having special needs. Please don't give me a label. It's like I'm disabled. If I become a therapist, I might call a family therapist, I might learn a word, IP, or a term, IP, but stop doing it to me. You see, I figured that some kids get chosen, and some kids get probably culled out. How long did you look before you chose me, and how many did you cull out? Yes, I have needs, and they're related to adoption in the event, and they're related to relinquishment. But they don't seem special to me. They seem normal. Do you really mean that you feel special? Because this wasn't the way you intended to build a family, but you don't want to talk about that? Don't always talk about me. Talk about you. Stop projecting all over me. Tell me how you feel, and let's get interested in this thing together. I'm going to cut there for a quick second, and one of the things, I'll make a comment, I found helpful in working with adoption issues is to try to get folks to just stop for a minute and get interested in the phenomena that's occurring. It's a fascinating one. Isn't it unbelievable to be able to accept Korean culture and heritage and broaden our family and broaden myself? Wouldn't that be a fascinating thing to do? And I think some of those kinds of approaches to this issue are a lot more helpful than dealing with, quote, special needs. Okay, the second thing, of course, I'm going to pick an object, and it's lawyers. I'm not a commodity. This is not a transaction. It may be for you, but it's not for me, and you've got control of the whole damn thing, so just cut it out. And that's all I can think of to say about it. Social workers, please stop. I don't need another intervention in my life. All I want to do is pick up a telephone and call a person who has a lot of meaning for me. I don't need it to be an intervention process at all. I may be angry, but that's okay. I'm not going to do anything with it, and you've got a lot of history you can look at to see that I'm not, but you refuse to look. Now, as an adult, I get very angry at going to groups and agencies and talking about how I feel and talking about the issue as it relates to me and holding up my hand and saying, I have hurt, and they like this. But on the other hand, not one of them has read David Kirk. Not one of them has a bibliography about adoption. All they're doing is saving kids, and they're doing it today. And I'm sick and I'm tired of it, because it's a block that you don't need to have. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, we got about 15 minutes to dialogue with you. Go.
Sharon, you said earlier as an adoptive parent that sometimes your kids would be abusive and you would go to another room and say, I know you're not angry at me. Did you ever say that to them, and do you recommend that adoptive parents who may be understanding these issues say to their child in the midst of this or afterwards, I think you're really angry at whatever, or about?
Sometimes I said it to them. Sometimes it wouldn't have made any sense to say it at that moment because they wouldn't have heard it anyway. In fact, what I got back, because I'm a social worker, was just that. It's just your social work mouth talking. It's like, so I couldn't win either way, and often I really did need to go away. And then when things were calmer, I was able to say to them, I often wonder whether when you get mad at me like that, if I've just denied you something, or I won't go with you someplace, or I can't take you with me someplace, if really this is about other parents, not me. So I will put it in at a time when they might hear it, or sometimes I would say it because I didn't know what else to say, but I didn't find it real useful at that moment. I didn't keep it a secret, though. I guess that's the issue. I did bring it up at some other point.
Do you think it's okay to be angry at your adoptive parents? At the adoptive parents? Because what I'm hearing is that it's not. And that it's just anger. I think I've listened to this whole discussion, and I think I'm going to be a social worker and want to be a social worker. I'm studying in social work school, and I think that anger is a real major issue that is not addressed. And in the sense that it's like if you talk about it, I think this whole workshop is based on how to avoid or why you're dealing with anger in such a way. Let's see if we can deal with it in a positive, constructive manner. And I think anger is really useful.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just hear that, well, as an adoptive mother, your child might have been angry at you, and that's okay. Actually, the direction, I was angry at my adoptive parents, and it's like I felt guilty for being angry at them.
Did you all get the feeling that we were saying anger wasn't okay?
No, not at all.
Okay. I think everybody here would say that anger is a very empowering emotion, and that it does need to be. In fact, I think Dory started out by saying feelings aren't good or bad. They really just are, and they need to be expressed. It's the only way that we get through feelings is to express them, otherwise they collect.
May I answer that just a little bit too? I think, a part of what you may be saying today is that some of the anger that you feel towards adoptive parents might be displaced from birth family issues. They might belong on the adoptive parents. And we talked a lot today about why you might reasonably be angry with adoptive parents. And then we also talked about what you could do about that so that you can kind of get on with your life. It's sometimes hard to figure out what's displaced anger and what's anger that really belongs there. And there again, the more you're willing to dialogue about it, using sentences that begin with the word I, and ask to listen to the other person and get them to talk too, the more you'll be able to figure out what's displaced anger and what's anger that really belongs within that relationship and needs to be addressed.
Where does rage fit in with that? I think it's rage bound in anger. I have more difficulty with rage and anger.
Okay, rage, I think, for my opinion, is something that, again, anger to me is not an indwelling thing that sits in my stomach. We talk about it that way. It's not something that I have, it's something that occurs to me. And if I can start looking at it that way as it happens, then I think I have an easier time of identifying really what I am angry at and who I'm angry at. And at that point, I can discuss it. Prior to that time, it's confusing. It's an amorphous kind of feeling. It's an undefined kind of a feeling, and that's the way I interpret rage. And I know there's some other definitions of it, but to me, it's that ongoing rage is very difficult to deal with. But that's really not anger for me, if I can separate those two terms in my own thinking.
Dory, do you want to address that? Yeah, rage is, I think, an accumulation of unaddressed anger. I like to think of the emotions in our bodies being little tiny versions of ourselves, thousands and thousands and thousands of them inside you. And if you have a feeling that piles up, it'll stay there waiting for a chance to be expressed for the next opportunity. It'll pile up and pile up and pile up. A person who has a psychotic break is someone with such a pile up of feelings inside that the kettle just boils over and it no longer is logical. I think some of the things on this list will help you to take that pile of anger that feels like rage and unload it in small, manageable pieces. And then there's not so much rage to crash through.
I think one of the things that I find a bit disturbing is I've gone to session after session where there's mental health professionals who are adoptive parents who are incredibly empathic, enlightened people, knew the right things to say to their adoptive children at various developmental stages. And that's so discrepant from what I believe the average adoptee experienced in the closed adoption system. For me, there was no discussion of adoption when I was growing up. And so, I mean, I get angry hearing just the way you describe things because it's so discrepant from the crazy-making reality I experienced where your adoptive parents say things like, you really look like your father. Well, you don't look a thing like him, that kind of thing.
I think I have to tell you that if my children were sitting here, they would probably tell you I didn't handle it well at all. I think what you see is an accumulation of knowledge, personally and professionally, that we're willing to share, and that is a system issue that I'm responsible for. I can take that blame on me. I've been around 28 years in the system. I created some of your adoptive parents. I really believed that what we were doing then made sense. I apologize for it every day of my life, but it's what we knew then. It's what we knew then. And I probably, if I stay in this field long enough, will apologize for things that I'm doing today that I'm going to find out in 10 years, God willing, I'm still around, probably weren't right on target either. I think your adoptive parents, this is not an excuse. I think that they were given the best we had to give them and they interpreted that to you and it wasn't the right stuff. And you paid for it and we're sorry.
And it may never be the right stuff because parents have inherent issues as it relates to their adoption and their own issues. And these blocks occur. Adoptees are going to have issues. Birth parents are going to have issues. It's how we handle them together. And one of the fundamental problems of the institution of parenthood is that the parent is right and the kid is wrong. And if we start from that position, we're going to end up in the same damn place.
And the other thing is, the adoptee is the repository of everybody's unfinished business. It's left to you.
Exactly.
Exactly. Isn't each
Precisely.
generation the repository of the generation
Well, you've
before?
got two sets of feelings coming at you. The silent birth mother you never knew, the shame, the guilt, and then the shame and guilt of your adoptive families who never talk about their infertility. And so you're the repository of two big piles of it.
That's right.
Even twice the amount, I think, of the average person.
And the tendency will be there. Yeah, it is. Well, that's the other part of it. That's right. That's the other side of it. Isn't it great we can say this? Because if we couldn't, we'd have more problem than we do.
But we're the tip of the iceberg that we're at this conference.
Maybe with the tip of the iceberg in terms of wanting to come to a conference. You know, we asked the question yesterday in the male session, why don't males come from conference? Males don't join things. They just aren't joiners generally. There's an ulterior motive. There is an ulterior motive to being a part of Rotary. It has nothing to do with why we would come to a conference like this. Sure.
In part, some of what we're saying here is for the little baby who was in this room, and I'm not sure if he is anymore, and for those of us who didn't get what we needed. If when you understand what you didn't get, sometimes you can pick up and go on better than if you don't even understand what you didn't get.
Right.
And
That's
I
true.
apologize for the degree to which that's painful for those who didn't get it.
I just wanted to compliment Angela on being able to identify her anger and her issues so
Mhm.
well. That's
For
great.
sure.
I mean, that's very hopeful to me.
I just want to address the issue of anger. I'm one who thrives on anger. I feel that anger is what makes this conference work. I think anger is what makes us meet every year, and it's what makes reform. Without the anger, we'll never reform a thing. We'll just say, isn't that cute? And we'll just go on with our lives and
Right.
our happy little dreams. It's the
That's a good
anger
point.
that makes us a good life.
Can I ask a question? How do you, when you've got a child experiencing anger, maybe this is not even answerable. How do you know when it is, quote, an adoption issue versus just your regular run-of-the-mill angry,
You don't?
whatever? I don't know.
Real difficult question, and sometimes you don't, and it's damaging either way. If it's not an adoption issue and you call it an adoption issue, it makes the kid furious. And if it is an adoption issue and you call it not an adoption issue, the kid's furious. And it's often hard to tell. Sometimes it takes a day or two after, especially for an acting out adoptee. You may act out for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 days. And then you get one casual comment that lets you know that it was or wasn't related to. But I think we have to be really sensitive to erring in both directions, because adoptees have normal developmental issues too, and they want credit for that.
Absolutely.
A couple comments and a question. First of all, I'm a birth mother, and as I sit here, I guess as I first got into my issues, I really spent a lot of time going to all the birth mother topics. And I've done a lot of healing, so now I've been branching out this year and going to the adoptee groups. And I have to say, listening to all this, it really makes me feel some anger about the paradox of, as a pregnant, unwed teenager, being told, this is the best thing you can do for your child, this is the most loving thing, and then hearing the paradox, what that experience is to the adoptee of being rejected. It just hits me, like, God, it's a bunch of shit.
But that doesn't necessarily, as I mentioned yesterday, adoption is an institution of paradoxes. And sometimes just learning to acknowledge that can free everybody up. That this is the downside and this is the upside.
And then my question is, I'm reunited with my daughter for a year and a half, who's 18. I was totally expecting to get a lot of rage from her. I guess maybe projecting to her the rage that I felt at the system and my parents and so forth. We had several conversations. I've been really asking her what it's been like for her that I would like to know. And she's been told, I realize she could be in denial, but it's hard for me to hear from her that I always knew I was adopted. I was never teased about being adopted. I know my parents love me as much as my 2 brothers who are not adopted. And I understand why you had to give me up. And to this day, she hasn't really expressed any anger at all. And I've told her, well, someday if you ever do feel, please know you can talk to me. But it's almost like it's hard for me to know, is that really all that's there for her? So I'm tossing that out. If anyone can give me an answer.
I want to respond to that. I'm a recovering adoptee and a recovering overeater, which are related to, they're both related. And my anger, I suppressed because I went into perfection all my life. I wanted my parents to be perfect, my adopted parents to be perfect parents, and I was a perfect kid, and I want my birth mother to be perfect. And I don't want to get angry at her. I'm still working. I'm now starting to sort it out, but I'm wanting everything to still be perfect. And I'm still, the anger's still inside. So I'm not telling my mother, my birth mother, that I'm angry at her. And I know I will have to tell her that. I'm still trying to make it a perfect world. I want my adoptive parents to be perfect, and I want my birth parents to be perfect.
And you know what? And that's a wonderful reflection of one of the earlier hypotheses. And you know what? The paradox is that maybe she really is happy and everything's okay.
And there are adoptees for whom that's true.
Maybe she had a good adoptive experience.
That's right. More so than not, really. More so than not, honestly.
I think this deals with something I also want to comment on is that because our stereotypes, and I think we all, in this common human in general, that when you have components like anger, strong emotions in there, the tendency to stereotype is even stronger. And I think adoptees, I'll say this without the tomatoes, need to be very conscious that they have a tendency to stereotype as well as be stereotyped, and we all need to be aware of this and careful about it, because there's the full ranges here, really, in adoption. I've been adopted for 10 years, and I've seen happy ones, and I've seen miserable ones, and everything in between. But I think we really have to individualize each case, really not use general terms and stereotypes.
I'm afraid
We're going to have to cut.
we want to thank you. You've been glorious to be with this morning, and so on top of
This concludes this session.